Morning, guys. Welcome back to this week's edition of Atypical. We are in our final week. It is week 4. And this week, we're discussing a little bit about a guy named Joseph. Some backstory for you. We were going to talk last week about Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau were brothers that were consistently at odds with one another. Esau being more of like a hunter-gatherer kind of guy, where he just wanted to go and hunt for meat and cook food and eat food, and that's about it. Whereas Jacob was a bit more of kind of like a shrewd businessman. Like, he'd be wearing a suit, he'd be trying to figure out how to work out deals and make mergers and that kind of stuff. And so they're constantly butting heads, but eventually Jacob ends up receiving the blessing from their father. He runs away. They end up, making peace as brothers, but eventually Jacob starts a family. And he has 12 sons. The 11th son is Joseph, this week's character. And Joseph was a very atypical individual. You might be thinking to yourself, what made Joseph so atypical? Well, if you don't know the story, it goes something like this. So, in Genesis, we learned a little bit about how Joseph is very gifted with interpreting dreams. However, that causes Joseph to be a bit prideful. So towards his brothers, he interprets a dream where he tells them, hey, eventually you're all going to bow to me someday. And his brothers grumble and they think, no. How prideful are you to say that we're going to bow to you? That's absolutely awful. So they get really upset with him. And this was just another conflict that had been happening between Joseph and his brothers. See, Joseph was considered the favorite by his father, Jacob. Jacob gave him a coat of many colors. He was consistently showing a lot more love to Joseph visibly than the other 10 older brothers. The 12th brother, Benjamin, he's a little young at this point, so he's not as much in the picture. But the 10 older brothers really have jealousy and spite towards Joseph. And so they come up with a plan where they're going to kill him. And they're like, all right, we're going to grab Joseph, we're going to take him away, we're going to kill him. But one of the brothers speaks up and says, well, maybe we shouldn't kill him once they get to the place where they're about to get rid of him. And he sees that there's a group of Ishmaelites, people from Ishmael, who, if you remember, is one of Abraham's sons. And these people that are walking by, he says, why don't we just sell Joseph to these people? That way we don't kill him, so our hands are clean. And if he dies, it's their fault. And then we can still go back to our dad and say, Dad, we're so sorry, but Joseph died. And so all the brothers go, yeah, that's a great idea. So they sell Joseph to these Ishmaelites, and then they take his coat of many colors, and they make it look like it's all tattered and torn and covered in blood, and they say, Dad, Joseph died. So Jacob is incredibly sad. He thinks his favorite son is gone, and that just wrecks him. But Joseph is still alive, as we know. But Joseph is taken, he's sold into slavery, and eventually he starts working for this guy named Potiphar. Potiphar is very, very important where he lives. He's a very important man, and he has a lot of important things to do, and so naturally he can't take care of his own house, and so he hires servants and slaves to be able to do it for him. And Joseph eventually becomes kind of like head butler. So he's kind of like the Alfred to Potiphar's Batman. And so Joseph, being the Alfred in the situation, Potiphar has a lot of trust for him. Potiphar gives him so much free reign, but eventually Potiphar's wife, she thinks Joseph's kind of cute. And so she wants Joseph to think that she's cute too. And Joseph says, no, I don't really think that you are. I think that that's wrong. Why don't you think Potiphar's cute? You're married to him anyways. And so then Potiphar's wife gets so mad that she lies to Potiphar and says, Joseph did something very, very bad. And Joseph says, no, I promise I didn't. But Potiphar says, I believe my wife, you're going to jail. So Joseph, distraught, ends up going to jail, and he didn't do anything wrong. He hasn't done anything to deserve this. But gradually, the pride that he had in sharing the dream of, hey, brothers, you're all going to bow to me, he's gradually being humbled where he works as a servant. He's now in jail. But he can still interpret dreams. And so while he's in jail, 2 men that work for Pharaoh, basically the king of Egypt, are sentenced to jail time. And so these 2 men that come to Joseph, they both have dreams. And they say, hey, we hear that you've been interpreting dreams. Joseph says, yeah, I actually do. And so they each tell Joseph their dream, and he tells the first guy, well, you're gonna get killed for the thing that you did. Sorry, bro, that kind of stinks. But for the second guy, he goes, you're gonna be okay, Pharaoh's gonna forgive you, and you'll end up doing the same thing that you were doing before. First guy, out of the picture, he ends up getting killed. The second guy goes, oh, that's so great, like, I'll never forget you, thank you so much. And Joseph goes, actually, please don't forget me, please tell Pharaoh about me, I'd love to get out of here. And the guy goes, yeah, sure, I'll help you get out of jail. Well, he forgot about Joseph. So he gets out of jail, and he's waiting for a long, long time. At least Joseph is waiting for a long, long time, stuck in jail, thinking, man, I guess this guy really did forget about me. Like, I'm not remembered. But eventually, Pharaoh starts having weird dreams. And the guy who worked for Pharaoh went, oh my goodness, I remember this guy who interpreted my dream. Let's go get him. So they get Joseph out of prison. He interprets Pharaoh's dream. And then he says, Pharaoh, actually, this dream is going to happen where there's going to be 7 years of great food and great harvest, and 7 years of famine, where we're not going to harvest any food from our fields. So here's a plan. And when he gives Pharaoh the plan, Pharaoh goes, I'm going to put you in charge of all that. I want you to be in charge of this. And so Pharaoh now is first in command. He's kind of like the president. And then second in command, the vice president, is Joseph. So Joseph goes from favorite of the brothers, very prideful, to slave, to head of a household, to jail, and throughout all that process he's being humbled, and now he's second in command of the biggest kingdom in the world at the time, and he's super duper humble. But it's interesting because now we're in the second year of that famine, and Joseph's brothers come from where they're living with their dad Jacob, and they come before Joseph not knowing that it's him, and they're saying, hey, we need some food, we need some help. And Joseph wants to try to see if their hearts have actually changed. So he frames his youngest brother, the 12th brother, Benjamin, for stealing, even though Benjamin didn't steal. And he wants to see if his 10 older brothers will take compassion on Benjamin. And they do. And they say, no, spare Benjamin, take me. Joseph sees the heart change. And eventually, in chapter 45 of Genesis, Joseph says in verse 3, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near. And he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph sees that his purpose was not so that his brothers could gain favor with his father, but so that he could end up saving his family. Joseph recognizes that God's promise of protecting his family is being kept. But he also wants to forgive his brothers. So he says this in verse 13. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Joseph wants his whole family to come live with him. He wants them all to come to Egypt because he loves them. And you know what? He chooses to forgive his brothers. And that's incredibly atypical. If your siblings sold you into slavery, would you be atypical enough to forgive them? I'm the oldest of 6. And if my 5 younger siblings managed to sell me into slavery, 30 years later, I don't know if I would be able to forgive them. I'm going to be honest, that would be really, really hard. But Joseph was able to forgive his brothers. He was incredibly atypical for doing that. So I want you to think about this with me. Have you ever gotten into an argument or a dispute with your family, the way that Joseph and his brothers kind of butt heads when they were younger? Do you ever butt heads with your family? And if you do, how do you normally handle that? Do you want to forgive or do you want to be right? Do you value your family member that you're arguing with, or do you care more about winning? You really have to evaluate where you are in these, and we want to talk about it tonight to really see what does it look like to be atypical to forgive. The atypical family, the atypical believer pursues forgiveness, pursues the relationship, pursues the person more than winning the argument. I really want you guys to remember that. Families seek forgiveness out of love rather than disputes out of pride. Love will always be greater than pride. Forgiveness is always better than making a fight go even longer. Thank you guys so much for being with us for this Atypical series, and we will see you all tonight at our discussion time.